Have you ever wondered why, after years of studying English, you still struggle to speak fluently? You've memorized vocabulary, aced grammar tests, and even binge-watched English shows, but when it's time to speak, the words just don't come out the way you want. Sound familiar? The truth is, there are some hidden reasons why you're still stuck, reasons no one really talks about. Maybe you're trapped in the learning loop, focusing too much on perfection, or just not immersing yourself enough in the language. But don't worry, because today we're breaking it all down and giving you real, actionable solutions to finally unlock your fluency. Stick around. This might just be the episode that changes everything for you. Hey everyone, welcome back to Fluent English Pod, where we help you train your mind to think in English and speak fluently. I'm Dave with our co-host Emma.
Hey, we're so glad you're here. Whether you're listening on your way to work, while making dinner, or just winding down for the day, thanks for spending this time with us.
We're going to touch on some real pain points, but don't worry. We're also going to give you practical solutions to help you finally break through and start speaking English confidently.
And of course, we've got a fun word challenge for you later, so stick around. But first, let's get into it. Dave, why do you think so many people struggle with speaking English fluently, even after years of studying?
Well, here's the first truth why so many people struggle with fluency. Emma, have you ever met someone who's been studying English for years, knows all the grammar rules, has a vocabulary list longer than a grocery receipt, but when it's time to speak, crickets?
That's a great analogy. It's like they've got this massive toolbox full of shiny tools, words, phrases, grammar rules, but they never actually take them out and build anything. It's all just sitting there, collecting dust.
Exactly, and that's what I call the learning loop. You're constantly learning, but you're not using what you learn. It's like binge-watching cooking shows but never stepping into the kitchen. You might know how to make a souffle in theory, but if someone hands you a whisk, you're like, what do I do with this?
That's what's really happening if we put our thoughts first and think deeper. And you know what's funny? I used to be like that too. I remember learning all these fancy words like exacerbate and ubiquitous. But when I tried to use them in a conversation, I'd freeze up. I'd be like, the situation was very, bad. Really, really bad.
Really, really bad. That's classic. But here's the thing. Fluency isn't about knowing every word or every grammar rule. It's about being able to use what you do know to communicate effectively. You don't need to sound like Shakespeare to have a conversation. Sometimes really, really bad gets the job done.
Totally. And that's why the solution here is so simple. You've got to start speaking, even if it's just a little bit every day. Find a language partner, join a conversation group, or, here's a fun one, talk to yourself in English. I used to do that all the time. I'd be in the shower like, okay, Emma, today we're going to talk about the weather. It's sunny. I like sunny days.
That's amazing. And honestly, talking to yourself is such an underrated strategy. It's low pressure, and it helps you get comfortable forming sentences. Plus, no one's around to judge you if you mess up, unless your cat gives you a weird look.
Ha ha ha, my cat definitely judges me. But here's the emotional part. I know it can feel scary to speak, especially if you're worried about making mistakes. But here's the truth. Mistakes are how we learn. Every time you mess up, your brain is like, okay, let's not do that again. And slowly but surely, you improve.
Absolutely. And let's be real, no one expects you to be perfect. Even native speakers make mistakes. I mean, I once told someone, I'm so hungry I could eat a horse. Wait, no, that's not right. I could eat a whole pizza? The point is, communication is about connection, not perfection.
Exactly. So, if you're stuck in the learning loop, here's your action plan. Start small. Have a 2-minute conversation with a friend. Describe your day out loud in English. Or, if you're feeling brave, record yourself speaking and listen back. It might feel awkward at first, but I promise it gets easier.
And remember, every time you speak, you're breaking out of that loop. You're not just collecting tools anymore. You're building something amazing. Your fluency.
So, what's one sentence you're going to practice saying today? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget, Mistakes are welcome here. In fact, we celebrate them.
All right, that's it for pain point one. Next up, we're tackling another big one, the perfection trap. Trust me, you don't want to miss this.
Dave, have you ever met someone who is obsessed with perfection? Obsession makes you scared of making even a single mistake. That leads to no speaking at all.
Oh, absolutely. It's like they're waiting for the perfect moment to start speaking English. Spoiler alert, that moment never comes. It's like waiting for the perfect time to go to the gym. Oh, I'll start on Monday. No, maybe next Monday. Actually, maybe next year.
Exactly. And here's the thing. When you're too focused on perfection, you end up paralyzing yourself. You're so worried about saying something wrong that you don't say anything at all. And honestly, that's heartbreaking because language is about connection, not perfection.
Totally. I mean, think about it. When you're speaking your native language, do you always use perfect grammar? Do you always pronounce every word perfectly? Of course not. You might say things like, where's the thingy, the thing you use to open bottles?
The thingy. Yes. And yet, somehow people still understand you. Because communication isn't about being perfect. It's about getting your point across. It's about sharing ideas, feelings, and experiences.
Exactly. And here's a funny story. When I was first learning Spanish, I once tried to say, I'm embarrassed. But instead I said, I'm pregnant, in Spanish.
Oh no, but you know what? You survived. And I bet you never made that mistake again. That's the thing about mistakes. They're not the end of the world. They're just stepping stones to getting better.
Absolutely. And here's the emotional part. I know it can feel terrifying to make a mistake, especially if you're worried about being judged. But here's the truth. Most people aren't judging you. In fact, they're probably impressed that you're trying to speak their language.
Exactly. And let's be real, even native speakers make mistakes. I mean, I once said I could care less instead of I couldn't care less. And my friend was like, Emma, that means the opposite of what you think it means. So, if native speakers can mess up, why are we holding ourselves to such impossible standards?
Right. The goal isn't to be perfect, it's to communicate. And here's a practical tip. Instead of aiming for perfection, aim for progress. Celebrate the small wins. Did you have a 5-minute conversation in English today? That's a win. Did you learn a new phrase and use it in a sentence? That's a win.
And here's another tip. Give yourself permission to make mistakes. Literally, say to yourself, it's okay if I mess up. I'm learning. Because here's the thing. Every mistake you make is proof that you're trying. And that's something to be proud of.
Exactly. So if you're someone who's been waiting for the perfect moment to start speaking English, here's your wake-up call. That moment is now. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be you, trying your best.
And remember, every time you speak, you're getting better. Even if it's just one sentence, even if it's just, hi, how are you? That's progress. And progress is what fluency is all about.
So what's one sentence you're going to practice today, mistakes and all? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget, we're all in this together.
Now it's time to talk about immersion and why it's such a game changer. Trust me, you don't want to miss this.
Let's tackle another big reason why people struggle with fluency. Lack of immersion. Emma, have you ever met someone who studies English for an hour a day, maybe does a few exercises, and then goes back to their native language for the rest of the day?
Oh, absolutely. It's like dipping your toes in the water but never actually jumping in. And here's the thing. Language learning isn't just about studying, it's about living the language. You can't expect to become fluent if English is just a subject you study, like math or history. It has to become a part of your daily life.
Exactly. Think about it. If you wanted to learn how to swim, would you just read a book about swimming and call it a day? No, you'd get in the water, splash around, and maybe even swallow a little pool water along the way. It's the same with language. You've got to dive in.
Swallow a little pool water. That's such a great way to put it. And honestly, that's what immersion feels like sometimes. It's messy, it's uncomfortable, but it's also incredibly effective. I remember when I was learning French, I used to watch French cooking shows even though I had no idea what they were saying half the time. But you know what? I started picking up words like émincer, to slice, and fouetter, to whisk. And now I can whip up a mean omelet while sounding fancy.
That's amazing. And it's such a great example of how immersion works. You don't have to understand everything right away. Just being surrounded by the language helps your brain start making connections. It's like your subconscious is working overtime, even when you're not actively studying.
Exactly. And here's the emotional part. I know it can feel overwhelming to immerse yourself in a new language. It's like being thrown into the deep end of the pool. But here's the truth. You don't have to do it all at once. Start small. Change the language settings on your phone to English. Follow English-speaking influencers on social media. Listen to English music or podcasts while you're commuting.
And here's a fun one. Try thinking in English, like when you're making your morning coffee, instead of thinking, I need to add sugar. Think, okay, I'm adding sugar now. It sounds silly, but it works. I used to do this all the time when I was learning Spanish. I'd be like, Dave, you're brushing your teeth. Good job, Dave.
Good job, Dave. I love that. And you know what? That's the kind of immersion that doesn't feel like work. It's playful, it's fun, and it's effective. Another tip, watch movies or TV shows in English with subtitles. Start with subtitles in your native language, then switch to English subtitles, and eventually try watching without them. It's like leveling up in a video game.
Yes, and don't forget to practice active listening. When you're watching or listening to something in English, pay attention to how native speakers use phrases and expressions. For example, if you hear someone say, I'm just pulling your leg, write it down and try using it in a conversation later. It's like collecting little gems of the language.
And here's the thing. Immersion doesn't have to be a solo journey. Find a community. Join an English-speaking club, participate in online forums, or even play multiplayer games in English. I once joined an online book club where we discussed novels in English, and it was such a game changer for my fluency.
That's awesome. And let's not forget the emotional side of this. Immersion helps you feel the language. It's not just about memorizing words, it's about understanding the culture, the humor, the nuances. It's about feeling connected to the language in a way that textbooks can't teach you.
Exactly. So, if you're not immersing yourself in English, here's your challenge. Pick one thing you can do today to bring more English into your life. Maybe it's changing your phone's language settings, or maybe it's watching an episode of your favorite show in English. Whatever it is, take that first step.
And remember, immersion isn't about being perfect. It's about being consistent. Even 10 minutes a day can make a huge difference over time. So, what's one way you're going to immerse yourself in English today? Let us know in the comments.
All right, that's it for pain point number 3. Next up, we're talking about consistency and why it's the secret sauce to fluency. Don't go anywhere.
Now comes our fun with words segment. We know that our listeners are waiting for the segment. So, Emma, are you ready?
I'm ready. Okay, listeners, here's the challenge. We're going to give you 3 words, and you have to use all of them in one sentence. Ready? Here are the words: fluency, confidence, and breakthrough.
Ooh, that's a good one. All right, listeners, take a moment to think about it and then comment down your sentence. We can't wait to see what you come up with.
Okay, let's talk about another big reason why people struggle with fluency: inconsistency. A lot of people study hard for a week or 2, then take a break, and then start again. But language learning is a marathon, not a sprint.
Exactly. Consistency is key. Even if you only study for 15 minutes a day, doing it every day is way more effective than studying for 3 hours once a week.
And here's a tip. Create a routine. Maybe you listen to an English podcast on your way to work, or you practice speaking with a friend every evening. Find what works for you and stick to it.
And don't forget to track your progress. Keep a journal of new words you've learned or conversations you've had. It's a great way to see how far you've come. All right, Emma, shall we discuss some of the difficult words that we use today?
Oh, Dave, I almost forget that segment, but I'm pretty sure that our listeners are curious about difficult words. So, our first words is exacerbate. To make a problem, situation, or feeling worse. For an example, I was already running late for work, and then the traffic exacerbated my stress. I just wanted to scream.
Oh no! So the traffic didn't just make you late, it made your stress even worse. That's a perfect example of exacerbate. Okay, my turn. How about ubiquitous? It means something that's everywhere or seems to be everywhere at the same time. Like smartphones, they're ubiquitous. Everywhere you go, people are glued to their screens.
They're literally ubiquitous. All right, next word, immersion. This one's important for language learning. It means completely involving yourself in something, like a language or culture. When I moved to Spain, I decided to go all in with immersion. I only watched Spanish TV, listened to Spanish music, and even tried to dream in Spanish.
Ha ha ha! That's next level immersion. No wonder you became fluent so quickly. Okay, my turn again. Let's talk about nuances. These are small, subtle differences in meaning, tone, or expression. For example, in English, saying I'm fine can mean you're actually fine, or it can mean you're upset but don't want to talk about it. The tone and context give it different nuances.
That's why listening to native speakers is so important. You pick up on those little nuances. All right, next word, paralysis. This is when you're unable to move, act, or function, often because of fear or shock. For an example, I had such paralysis during my first job interview.
Progress doesn't have to be huge, it just has to keep moving forward. All right, listeners, which of these words are you going to try using today? Let us know in the comments.
The truth is, speaking English fluently isn't about being perfect or knowing everything. It's about being consistent, stepping out of your comfort zone, and actually using the language.
And remember, everyone's journey is different. Don't compare yourself to others. Focus on your progress and celebrate your wins, no matter how small. If you found this episode helpful, give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and share it with a friend who's also on their English learning journey.
So, what's one thing you're going to do differently after listening to this episode? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to share one new word or phrase you learned today.